engine just cut out.
We're just floating.
So I'm not sure what to do. You saw me stupidly filling up, putting more oil in. So I've now overfilled the oil, the engine with oil, which apparently can be as bad for the engine as not enough oil. So I'm going to have to siphon some of that out. First thing in the morning, haven't slept well, tired. Just need to have a look at this engine again now. But I have another problem.
Okay, so that's enough of the drama. Shall we have a look at what happened? Because clearly we did get out of it, because we're sitting here right now.
Yes, well, I think in the next few minutes we're going to demonstrate my stupidity and how I made some incorrect decisions.
Yeah, but to be fair, there are a few things we just need to make clear. We've been up since 6 and we'd been travelling at this stage for more than 12 hours. So we were very tired, and it wasn't just the amount of hours we'd been up, it was the fact that we'd been dodging fishing boats and fishing nets all day. So the adrenaline was pumping all the time because you never quite know where they're going or what nets are where. So you have to be totally focused all that time, and that is really very, very tired. Makes you very, very tired, doesn't it?
And of course we're about to enter the world's busiest shipping lane at night, and we'd never done it before, so we were very apprehensive about that as well, I suppose.
Yeah, it was a recipe for disaster.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah. Okay, so alright, so I made some bad decisions, and we are here to show you the lessons that we learned and to demonstrate that we make the mistakes so you don't have to.
Yeah.
I think the first problem was that we had covered the control panel to the engine. Because we were at night, the control panel was displaying quite a few bright lights, and it was affecting our night vision, so we covered up that panel.
Yeah, with a cushion lent against it.
With a cushion, yeah. So when that engine started cutting out, we had to pull away the cushion, and as the engine cut out, I saw, of course, that there was no oil pressure.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what we assumed the problem was. So first lesson, I guess, then, use the alarms or lack of them to give you a clue, and if there was no alarm, then it was unlikely to be a drop in pressure.
Of course, the first thing I should have done was to have checked the oil level, and that would have been simply to examine the dipstick. So I think the only dipstick on the boat that night was me for not doing that straight away, and this is something that Norman Boys on YouTube underneath last week's episode picked up on, and reminds us that too high an oil level can be just as dangerous as too low an oil level.
Yeah. So really it's a case of remembering to use the tools around you to do some straightforward and simple checks before you go ploughing into what you think the problem may be.
So the reason why I had assumed that this was an oil pressure issue was because of a previous experience when we first got the engine. Our Beta has an auxiliary oil filter, so it basically sits on top of the engine, which is great because it means that we can change the filter easily. The problem is that because it's mounted on top of the engine on a bracket, it's prone to vibration, and when we first got that engine, that oil filter had worked itself loose and ended up pissing oil all over the engine, and we did in fact lose oil pressure. So I'd had this sort of fixated in my head that it must be that problem, and of course every time I then turn the ignition on, the oil pressure gauge doesn't engage. It doesn't engage obviously until the engine is actually turning over, but I was so paranoid about turning that ignition and fouling the engine and basically seizing up. So, you know, I'd turn it for a couple of seconds and turn it off, not thinking, of course, it's not going to show the oil pressure at all.
So I guess what we're saying here is that it's okay to have previous experience and use that, but don't make assumptions based on a similar situation that's gone before. You really got to do your checks first.
Yeah, and as for the oil that we saw at the back of the engine, to be honest, I think that was just left over from when I'd done an oil change in the marina a couple of weeks before. Bit naughty really, because the next lesson there is simply just keep your engine clean and keep your engine bay clean.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I didn't do, so that was a bit of a schoolboy error. Of course, the sound of the engine cutting out and the way that it cut out should have been a clue. And I mean, I've even been on boats which have been starved of fuel one way or another, and that's exactly what the engine sounds like. And James Duckworth on last week's episode reminds us that low oil pressure scenario would have killed the engine a lot quicker than the way that our engine died.
It was a first for us though, wasn't it? Because as far as I know, we've never had a fuel issue before, is that right?
We've never had a fuel issue in 10, 11 years. We are so meticulous with keeping our fuel clean that we've never had this problem before. But I think, you know, at the back of my mind, and probably yours as well, it was always a case of when this is going to happen. Not if, but when it's going to happen.
Yeah. So audio clues like no alarm and a spluttering engine should have told us pretty much what the problem was. So what did we do then?
Well, the first thing we did was to check the new filter. If you remember, we put on a new Raycor 500 filter. So we had a look at that, and that seemed to be okay. Then we used the fuel lift pump just to try and push some fuel through. But I think what really helped was we reconnected the electric fuel pump, which we'd previously disconnected when the engine got air in the fuel lines. So we disconnected that. So I think by reconnecting that, it helped push through whatever was in that fuel and pushed it through the system, and yeah, it was okay.
So in the final analysis, it was dirty fuel or something in the fuel?
I think it's more likely to have been a single foreign body. I think if it was dirty fuel, then you would have algae working its way through, and every time you turn the engine, clear the pipes, more algae would come through, and so it would just keep cutting. And remember that we ran for 12 hours already, and then once we'd fixed the engine, we then ran for another 12 hours to get to Port Dickson. So it was just one single event. So I think more than likely maybe something that was introduced into the Raycor filter when we fitted it.
I think that's probably likely. It was the only change, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, let's hope that it's gone through and we're okay now.
Okay, we should give some props, I think, to some of our viewers on last week's video who did correctly identify what the problem was.
Clever old people.
Yeah, cleverer than us, that's for sure. Nerd3927 said, I would say it was starved of fuel, the way it sounded dying on camera. Absolutely right. Tom Paulson also said, you have pissed off the diesel gods for sure. So I think Tom had some kind of inkling it was a fuel issue. Charles Phillips also guessed correctly by saying it sounded like fuel starvation. White Master Mariner said that was not a low oil shutdown, that was a fuel starvation issue. And Kevin Costner also correctly diagnosed the problem. So yeah, a lot of people did get it right.
Yeah, well done guys.
Where were you when we needed you?
The other thing that people have commented on is how calm and collected we appeared to be while it was all going on. There's this one from Patrick Stitch. Nightmare situation in that ocean for sure. Very scary situation. I'd probably have a panic attack and wouldn't be able to think straight. Well, to be honest with you, we were panicking like mad inside. We have learned to try not to panic too much to each other because it upsets each other. But more importantly than that, it was the filming, wasn't it? It
was. I think because we'd made the point of getting the cameras out, we knew that you were going to be watching this. So in a way, it kind of helped us, didn't it?
Yeah, we didn't all look like complete idiots, did we?
Even though we are.
We are, and we felt frightened inside. Just doing that helped to temper the situation a bit, I think, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so what normally happens in those situations is that the last thing on your mind is grabbing the camera.
Yeah.
Normally it's about dealing with the situation immediately, but this time I said to you, get the camera. And you said, no, we need to sort the situation out. But I think that really did help. Yeah. But as Liz says, internally, I was shitting myself.
Yeah.
Finally, we should just pick up on one of the comments that was put up by Liberal Conspiracy, who says, you are engaged in emergency head scratching. Maintenance is what you do to avoid some of that. In this situation, you should show 2 all-round red lights at night and 2 balls by day. See Colregs Rule 27. And Liberal Conspiracy is referring to the vessel not under command section of the Colregs. By definition, a vessel not under command is unable to manoeuvre as required of an ordinary vessel because of exceptional circumstance. A vessel not under command has usually suffered a disability which is not easy to predict or classify. An example would be a vessel with a disabled rudder. So what I found interesting about a vessel not under command, I always thought it meant that it was underway. But it's not always. It includes boats at anchor because, I think a couple of us, myself included, kind of flippantly wrote off liberal conspiracies comment, but I think it's valid because it does also apply to boats at anchor. Because my reply was going to be, well, we were at anchor, so it doesn't matter, and we had the sails, but actually we had engine problems and we didn't have wind, so we fell into this category. And I think liberal conspiracy was right to bring up this idea that, you know, maybe you should have been shown 2 Red Bulls.
Yeah.
The only 2 Red Bulls on that boat at the time was...
We don't want to know.
Interested to know, you know, if you have a boat, do you carry all these extra balls for those kind of situations? I know we don't. So, you know, another lesson learned there.
All right. So, with all of that over...
Shame over.
Yeah, shame over. We were ready. We sorted it. We were off. And there was a bloody great big black cloud looming straight in front of us.
Yes. Well, it did hit us, but fortunately it looked a lot worse than it really was. It blew over, it brought a bit of wind, so we were able to get the sails out, get the engine on, and we were able to begin motor sailing our way down to Port Dickson.
Well, after all the drama of last night, it's been so far quite a calm day. Thank goodness. It's nice weather, there's no bloody lightning or thunder so far, and all we've really seen is lots of very, very big ships on that side and on that side. Some are anchored and some are going in the very obvious lanes that are marked on the chart, which is nice. It's nice to see them go past. Got this great little hard-working tug behind us pulling a huge barge, and he's doing a really good job. So yeah, all in all, so far so good. At the moment we've just gone past Klang, the port of Klang, which is the closest port to KL. So there's a lot of deliveries coming and going for mainland Malaysia here. I guess a lot of them are coming up from Singapore, fewer are coming south, loads more coming up towards us than are going that way.
And finally, which do you prefer? Trawling fishing boats or big commercial tankers?
When it comes to navigating, actually, I think that the commercial ships, the big ships, are easier. They're faster, so you've got to react quicker. But they all have AIS, they all tend to go in one straight line. You know, they're not carrying dirty great load of nets and stuff behind them, and they don't try and play chicken with you.
Buzz about coming into somewhere new, especially when it's a big port like this at dusk. Haven't been here before, it's all lit up, lots of navigation lights and buoys and markers and channels to navigate our way through. Quite exciting though, especially after last night's adventure. And behind us you can see that boat which came around behind us. A little tug has just met him, taking him off somewhere, probably to Port Dickson, which is the main port here. And the Port Dickson we're going to is the name of the, well actually it's called Admiral Marina, it's not Port Dickson, it's called Admiral Marina, which is just a couple of miles just over there.